In the previous spoiler, it was mentioned that after a month of relentless hunting, Luo Feng had only managed to enslave 3 Peak King Immortals skilled in soul aspects and 6 Limit King Immortals, while over 100 King Immortals had perished in the process. This alone shows just how difficult soul enslavement truly is. Many viewers are wondering, if Luo Feng could so easily control Irina and King Heavy Arrow before, why has soul enslavement now become so challenging? In fact, this isn't contradictory, as the difficulty of soul enslavement is inherently relative. Although the human soul is completely different from the structure of the Zerg Queen, their soul essences still exist on the same level. After all, both Irina and the Golden Horned Beast were at the World Master level at the time. Moreover, Luo Feng's consciousness and willpower then were already on par with the human peak World Master. Combined with his astonishing 3,200-fold spiritual amplitude and the enhancement of his innate secret technique, he could perform the 10,000 soul control secret technique with ease. Not to mention, Irina, due to Huyin Bo's influence, was originally in a dormant state. Even if she awakened during the process and instinctively resisted, she had already lost the initiative, greatly increasing Luo Feng's success rate. However, according to the story's setting, the advancement from apprentice to World Master is mainly a transformation of the body, while the breakthrough from World Master to Immortal marks the true sublimation and qualitative leap of the soul. Thus, there exists a vast gap between the souls of World Masters and Immortals, making it nearly impossible for a World Master to enslave an Immortal level being, where it would be no different from smashing a stone with an egg. Therefore, for a World Master to enslave an Immortal level powerhouse, he must not only rely on mental amplitude secret techniques, law empowerment, and soul-based secret techniques to strengthen his soul, but also find a way to weaken the target's immortal divine power, which is essentially annihilating part of their divine body. Either, like with King Heavy Arrow, he must severely wound the target until nearly 90% of their divine body is destroyed and they fall into slumber, completely losing the ability to resist, or he must injure the opponent until only 1/10 of their peak power remains, and then forcibly perform the enslavement technique. Yet even then, success depends entirely on the caster's control and the target's willpower. However, Luo Feng's only method to annihilate an immortal's divine body was the Fema Venom. Each strike could destroy anywhere from 30 to 80% of a Peak King Immortal's divine body. However, it was extremely difficult to control the precise intensity. If he struck too hard, the target would perish instantly. What made matters worse was that if the opponent began burning their divine body at the start of the battle, their strength would skyrocket. Since Luo Feng himself had no immortal divine power to burn, he could only rely on his superior speed to continuously evade, slowly wearing the enemy down in a prolonged battle of attrition until they were forcefully consumed to death. This was precisely why nearly 90% of Luo Feng's hunting operations ended in failure. After all, his targets were not defenseless prey, where they were immortal powerhouses capable of fierce resistance. It's worth mentioning that the King Immortals who was personally enslaved by Luo Feng, aside from King Heavy Arrow and the first one he captured, the Peak King Immortals skilled in soul aspects King Honed Heart, there were only 2 other Limit King Immortals were deliberately captured and controlled as slaves for the specific purpose of wielding his 2 heavy treasures. It must be understood that with Luo Feng's current realm, the maximum number of soul slaves he could directly control was only 100. If he were willing to spend several thousand or even tens of thousands of years cultivating the 10,000 soul control secret technique to the perfection of the 4th stage, then in theory, he could raise that limit to 1,000. Otherwise, even with the support of a 3,200-fold spiritual amplitude, mastering the 3rd stage would still only allow him to command up to 100 soul slaves. Moreover, once a soul slave perished, that slot would be permanently lost and could never be recovered. Hence, Luo Feng had to be exceedingly cautious when selecting and enslaving new targets. Fortunately, once Luo Feng successfully controlled a soul master, all the slaves under that master would, through a chain reaction of soul resonance, recognize Luo Feng as their supreme ruler and obey his every command. Thus, Luo Feng now had over 50 slaves who could be directly ordered and commanded through soul connection. Still, among them, only those Peak King Immortals skilled in soul aspects and the Limit King Immortals could truly provide substantial assistance to him. This month-long hunt campaign brought Luo Feng tremendous gains. After all, Luo Feng not only enslaved numerous powerful beings but also amassed an astronomical fortune exceeding 1 trillion mixed yuan units. His wealth now rivaled or even surpassed that of weaker universe country rulers. Satisfied with his gains within the Star Tower, Luo Feng finally decided to bring his hunting campaign to an end. After deciding to leave the Star Tower, Luo Feng immediately obtained the precise cosmic coordinates of King Tanjhin through a trusted ally within the Hom Alliance. At that time, King Tanjhin was leading his slaves deep within a perilous region of the 7th battlefield, an area whose danger level rivaled even that of the Star Tower. The region was infamous for its 2 colossal vortices that created an extremely lethal magnetic field, and a single misstep during teleportation into the vortex's core would result in one being torn apart and completely annihilated, even for a King Immortal level existence. Using the Divine Kingdom teleportation power of King Extreme Rainbow's plant-type auxiliary lifeform, Luo Feng and his team quickly arrived near the target area. To avoid alerting their quarry, Luo Feng dispatched only his 3 most powerful combatants to carry out the operation, while he and the rest of his soul slaves remained hidden within his world ring. After the Masha clan clone led the main strike team to a safe zone near King Tanjhin through teleportation, it too withdrew and concealed itself within the world ring. After all, the Masha clone was fundamentally an energy lifeform where it could not draw upon the power of the general armor, nor did it possess a soul to wield the general soul's strength. Its base attributes remained at the world master level. Even though Luo Feng's comprehension of the laws and his self-created secret techniques had long surpassed ordinary world masters, the Masha clone's overall combat strength was still only comparable to that of a Marquis Immortal. Against a peak King Immortal level opponent, it would stand no chance. To appear rashly would only become a liability. As for Luo Feng's human body, it was equally unwise for him to act personally, as the name King Blade River had grown far too renowned. Powerhouses like King Dragon Pagoda, a limit King Immortal who combat power near to an invincible King Immortal, were already scouring the extraterritorial battlefield for any trace of him, while King Lifefall had even issued a massive bounty for his coordinates. If Luo Feng appeared before King Tanjhin in his King Blade River persona, the latter would immediately broadcast the news across the alliance. Given King Tanjhin's understanding of Luo Feng's past feats, he would never dare confront him directly. Such exposure would instantly ruin Luo Feng's entire plan. When Luo Feng's team teleported into the vicinity, King Tanjhin immediately sensed an abnormal fluctuation in space and swiftly detected the presence of King Overflowing Water and the other 2 limit King Immortals. Realizing the overwhelming gap in power, King Tanjhin's instinct was to retreat at once, but before he could teleport away, his path was completely sealed off by King Overflowing Water's spatial lockdown, cutting off every route of escape. Realizing that the newcomers harbored ill intent, King Tanjhin immediately ordered his soul slaves, a demon race peak King Immortal skilled in soul aspect, King on Mountain Demon, along with 2 of his limit King Immortal soul slaves to ignite their divine bodies and fight with full force. In an instant, a fierce battle erupted. Neither side held back. As the burning divine bodies released a surge of power, their auras skyrocketed, and the violent energy shockwaves caused the surrounding space to twist and distort. King Tanjhin and King on Mountain Demon simultaneously unleashed illusion attacks, attempting to control even one of the enemy's limit King Immortals, which alone would be enough to turn the tide of battle. Under the interference of their illusions, King Overflowing Water's forces struggled to exert their full strength. Seeing this, Luo Feng decided not to delay any longer and decisively ordered King Overflowing Water to unleash his heavy treasure. Empowered by the treasure, King Overflowing Water's secret technique erupted with terrifying might. Boundless seawater surged forth, forming a vast binding domain spanning over 1,000,000 kilometers, trapping King Tanjhin's group completely and preventing any chance of escape. Cornered and desperate, King Tanjhin was forced to summon an automaton race superweapon, the Disintegration Tower, and, burning over 10% of his divine body, fired a devastating space-rending laser in retaliation. However, King Tanjhin was ultimately only a peak King Immortal. Even after paying such a heavy price, the attack he unleashed could at best heavily wound a limit King Immortal. It was far from enough to reverse the battle. After all, in a state of divine body combustion, a limit King Immortal's pure energy power was already a level above that of a peak King Immortal. Moreover, at that very moment, King Extreme Rainbow wielded the powerful treasure, the Purple Bell. Protected by the bell's defense, King Tanjhin's devastating attack was weakened by 90%, leaving the remaining force incapable of posing any real threat to King Extreme Rainbow and the others. On the contrary, King Extreme Rainbow stopped holding back and directly activated the second form of attack of the Purple Bell to counterattack. It's worth mentioning that most heavy treasures possess 1 or 2 forms, some focused on support, others on direct offense. Those capable of holding dual forms are already considered top tier among heavy treasures. A deeper form often signifies exponentially greater power. If a weapon possesses 3 forms, it has already reached the level of an arcana, just like Luo Feng's Shiwu wings. Unfortunately, Luo Feng's comprehension of the original laws was still insufficient to awaken its full power. He could only activate the first form. Even so, that single form already granted him blistering, lightning-like agility, allowing him to navigate the chaotic spatial currents with effortless ease. Similarly, if King Purple Bell of the past had possessed sufficient comprehension of the original laws to fully awaken the second form of the Purple Bell, then in the battle for the sacrificial tower's treasure, the ultimate victor might well have been him. Even so, it was precisely because the Purple Bell could compress and condense explosive energy to an extreme degree, focusing it into a single direction. Otherwise, not even a high-grade Fire God Origin crystal could possibly have slain a Limit King Immortal. Now, King Extreme Rainbow's comprehension of the original laws far surpassed that of King Purple Bell. He had long crossed the threshold required to activate the Purple Bell's second form. Although he still could not draw out its full power, just one strike from him obliterated nearly half of King Tanjhin's divine body. Had King Extreme Rainbow not deliberately held back, King Tanjhin would have already been completely annihilated at this moment. Seeing that King Tanjhin's strength had fallen to less than 1/10 of his peak, Luo Feng immediately ordered his three-peak King Immortal who skilled in soul aspects such as King Honed Heart to attack and suppress him with full force. At this point, King Tanjhin's only thought was to escape. He even abandoned his own soul slaves, commanding them to fight to the death to cover his retreat. However, the power gap between the two sides was immense. King Tanjhin's soul slaves could barely resist the binding power of King Overflowing Water's treasure, let alone protect their master's escape. Under the joint suppression of the three soul masters, the gravely wounded King Tanjhin knew that his demise was inevitable. With only a trace of willpower remaining, he hastily connected to the virtual universe, sending a distress signal to numerous human powerhouses in hopes that rescue would arrive in time to grant him one last chance at survival. Luo Feng also received this distress signal. Of course, as a retired soldier, he could not have obtained it through official military channels. Moreover, given the enmity between them, King Tanjhin would never have sought his help. Luo Feng received the message only because his friends from the Han Alliance casually forwarded it. Realizing that the news had already spread, Luo Feng's heart tightened where he had no choice but to end the battle swiftly. After all, if a powerhouse nearing the invincible King Immortal level, someone like King Seven Swords, were to intervene, even Luo Feng, with all his current strength, would find himself at a severe disadvantage. Luo Feng could only race against time. Fortunately, within moments, King Tanjhin's consciousness was completely suppressed by King Honed Heart and the others. Not only did he lose control of his body, but even the last thread of his awareness connected to the virtual universe was severed, leaving him like a mindless husk, trapped in a slumber stage. Then, a familiar voice echoed deep within his consciousness. Despite his furious struggle and utter unwillingness, King Tanjhin was ultimately enslaved by Luo Feng, completely and irreversibly. With this, 4 more soul slaves at peak King Immortal level and above were added under Luo Feng's command. After successfully enslaving King Tanjhin, Luo Feng immediately ordered a retreat. But just as he was about to teleport away, a violent spatial fluctuation erupted. The entire area was abruptly sealed off, cutting off all escape routes. Nearly 20 powerhouses had arrived. Though King Tanjhin's distress message hadn't included many details, it had specifically mentioned that his opponent possessed 2 heavy treasures, which is a revelation that was enough to send countless allies rushing to the scene, eager to claim them for themselves. Despite Luo Feng being cautious and having activated a small detector to block all external detection signals the moment he began the enslavement, he was still detected by the higher-end detectors of a powerhouse who rushed over. They quickly locked onto his location and swept the area with divine power, attempting to expose Luo Feng and his group. With no other choice, Luo Feng emerged from hiding and tried to bluff his way through, posing as a fellow ally. However, an alien peak King Immortal immediately exposed Luo Feng's secret that he had already retired from the military. His words carried veiled provocation, deliberately inciting the other alien powerhouses to join forces and seize Luo Feng's treasures. In an instant, the atmosphere turned razor-sharp with tension. After all, while King Blade River's record of victories and fearsome reputation were well known, that fame also implied immense wealth hidden in his person. To many of the King Immortal powerhouses present, Luo Feng's actual strength was likely no more than that of a peak King Immortal. If they joined forces, they were certain they could kill him and claim his treasures. Of course, not everyone present intended to attack Luo Feng. First, the human King Immortal who had arrived earlier would naturally never strike at a fellow human. Second, while some of the aliens were not of the human race, they were still part of the Han Alliance, an organization founded and led by humans. They all knew that Luo Feng's fame had begun even before he gained his king title, thanks to his extraordinary defense in the extraterritorial battlefield. It was clear that he had powerful backing, perhaps even a teacher among the super powerhouses, or possibly one of the high-ranking members of the Hong Alliance itself. As such, those alien members dared not act recklessly, their greed tempered by fear of the consequences. However, those aliens from the remote star regions had only managed to enter the extraterritorial battlefield through layers of connections. Though nominally under the human faction, in truth, they shared no real interests with humankind and thus had no need to abide by its authority. For them, retirement meant complete freedom from humanity's influence, and without the restraints of the Hong Alliance's deterrence, they no longer had any reason to hold back. Faced with the lure of immense wealth, their greed for King Blade River's treasures had long been brewing. Now that Luo Feng had lost the protection of military law, their restraint vanished entirely, where the greed in their eyes turned into an overwhelming intent to kill. As more and more powerhouses gathered, fearing they might miss their chance, dozens of aliens finally struck first. A barrage of attacks erupted like a storm, shaking the heavens. Left with no choice, Luo Feng swiftly placed King Tanjhin and his soul slaves into his world ring and faced the encirclement alone. The battle exploded in an instant, and the aliens unleashed their secret techniques without mercy. Violet energy waves tore through space, shredding the void into fragments that even disrupted their own movements. Yet, to their shock, King Blade River, empowered by the Shi Wu wings, moved like a spectral shadow weaving through the chaotic space currents. His speed was so astonishing that not a single enemy could touch even a strand of his hair. In fact, within areas free of spatial lockdown, Luo Feng could teleport away at any moment, and even in locked space, his speed was still unmatched. Whether to fight or flee was entirely up to him. More terrifying still, he could choose his targets freely from among the dozens of attackers, striking them down one by one. Naturally, the alien who had provoked him first and ignited the battle became Luo Feng's primary target. As for that alien's ultimate fate, and whether Luo Feng's true formidable enemies would arrive in time? Stay tuned for the next spoiler, where I'll reveal it all. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching this video. Wish you a wonderful day.